300,000 years ago, the Sahara was not the endless expanse of sand we know today. Instead, it breathed with life. Monsoon rains swept northward, spilling into the desert's heart. Rivers carved wide valleys through what is now barren stone. Lakes the size of modern seas shimmered under the sun, their waters feeding an endless carpet of green. Herds of antelope, giraffe, and even elephants roamed freely, grazing on grasses that swayed with the wind. The transformation, though, was not sudden, but the product of slow rhythms deep within the earth. Subtle tilts of the planet's axis shifted the pattern of the monsoon. The Sahara, once dry, came alive, a land reborn every 20,000 years. This green Sahara was no myth. It was a recurring miracle written into the planet's clockwork, a paradise hidden beneath layers of time. In this Eden, early humans walked. They were not yet spread across the globe. They were few in number, vulnerable, and forever at the mercy of the sky. But here, surrounded by rivers and plains, they thrived. Fish filled the waters, birds darkened the skies, and fertile soil provided plants unknown to the desert we see today. The Sahara was no boundary then. It was a bridge. Its open grasslands linked east to west, north to south. Across this landscape, ancient humans moved with the seasons. They followed herds, gathered fruit, and left behind stone tools that now whisper their forgotten presence. Each artifact is a footprint in time, proof that where now there is silence, there was once life abundant. Yet the greening was fragile. It depended on the smallest changes in Earth's orbit, delicate balances between ocean, wind, and sun. For sea feet, now the Sahara bloomed, but already forces beyond human understanding were shifting again. Slowly, imperceptibly, the rains would falter, the lakes would shrink, the paradise would begin to fade. As the first chapter of this story closes, one question lingers in the wind. How long could such a fragile paradise endure? And what would happen when the green gave way once more to gold and dust? The greening of the Sahara did more than nourish landscapes. It transformed human destiny. As rivers swelled and lakes spread wide, early hominins found themselves in an environment unlike any other. For countless generations, their survival had been tied to scarce resources, meager rainfall, and relentless drought. But here, in this unexpected paradise, opportunity bloomed. Water was the lifeblood. Vast lakes offered fish in abundance, drawing humans to their shores. Primitive tools chipped from stone became instruments of survival. Scrapers for cleaning hides, points for spears, and blades for carving meat. With rivers carving through the plains, hunting paths opened wide. Herds of gazelles, antelopes, and hippos provided not just food, but skins and bones that became the building blocks of culture. The lush Sahara acted as a training ground. In this place, humans experimented, adapted, and learned the rhythms of a changing environment. Foraging expanded to include roots, fruits, and seeds that only grew in these wetter climates. Evidence left behind, flakes of stone tools and remnants of fire, reveal not a transient presence, but generations living and dying in the grasslands. But life here was not without danger. Predators thrived just as humans did. Lions and leopards stalked the edges of rivers. Crocodiles lurked in the still waters of lakes. And in every hunt, humans remained prey as much as predator. Their survival depended on unity, cooperation, and memory, the passing down of knowledge of which waters were safe which paths concealed danger, and when the rains would return. The Sahara was more than home. It was a classroom. In its wettest cycles, it forged humans into problem solvers, explorers, and survivors, preparing them for journeys yet to come. And in this crucible of abundance and risk, humanity learned to adapt not only to a landscape, but to the climate itself. Yet as centuries passed, a quiet shift began once again. The Earth's orbit, invisible to human eyes, tilted just slightly, altering the monsoon's reach. Rains weakened. Lakes, once vast, began to retreat. The paradise that nurtured humankind carried within it the seeds of its own undoing. The question was no longer how humans would thrive in abundance, but how they would endure in scarcity. And so begins the next chapter in the Sahara's story, the slow return of the desert. The Sahara's paradise was never meant to last. Like a pendulum set in motion by the heavens, Earth's orbit shifted once more. The tilt of the planet, subtle but relentless, began to draw the rains southward. Clouds that once spilled their bounty over the Sahara now passed it by, leaving behind silence and dust. At first, the change was barely noticeable. A shorter, rainy season, a lake that receded just a little more each year. But in the span of centuries, the difference became undeniable. Rivers that had once fed the plains ran thin, their channels drying into cracked valleys of stone. Lakes, some larger than today's Caspian Sea, shrank into shallow basins. Grasslands, once stretching endlessly, began to wither into brittle patches. The animals felt it first. Herds thinned as waterholes vanished. Migratory paths shifted away from the drying north. Predators followed, leaving behind empty savannas where silence replaced the thundering of hooves. And the humans, who had once thrived here, faced an unfamiliar challenge: scarcity. No longer could families rely on abundant fishing grounds or fertile foraging. They traveled farther for less, moving cautiously along the shrinking waterlines. Some adapted by turning southward, retreating toward wetter climates. Others clung desperately to the land they had called home, watching as paradise transformed into a place of survival. Archaeological traces reveal this struggle. Stone tools scatter across now barren ridges where once humans camped beside overflowing rivers. Fossilized shorelines tell of vanished lakes, their waters long gone, but their memory etched into the rock. Even paintings, carved tens of thousands of years later on desert walls, tell of a time when giraffes, hippos, and elephants roamed freely where today there is only sand. The green Sahara was ending. Its lush reign had lasted thousands of years, but the desert was reclaiming its throne. Wind began to sweep across the open plains, carrying fine dust into the skies. Storms grew violent, stripping away the last traces of green. Yet, in this collapse, humanity discovered resilience. Scarcity demanded innovation. Small bands learned to conserve, to move farther, to endure longer. The Sahara was no longer a bridge of abundance. It was becoming a crucible of endurance. And so, as the land grew harsher, early humans began to look outward. If the Sahara could wither into desert, then perhaps survival lay beyond its horizon. Soon, this shifting climate would do more than shape the land. It would shape the very migration of humanity across continents. As the Sahara dried and the rains retreated, humanity stood at a crossroads. The grasslands that had once cradled their survival had become barren. The rivers that fed their camps dwindled into silence. Where there had been life, there was now dust. And so, the land itself whispered a command: move or perish. For the first time, climate became a force that pushed humanity outward. Small groups began to follow the last remaining rivers southward, while others turned east and north, chasing faint promises of water and game. The Sahara, once a green corridor of abundance, had become a gatekeeper. Only those who could endure the journey would pass through. The migration was not a single march, but a slow, generational drift. Children were born along drying lake shores, only to see those waters vanish by adulthood. Families set out across treacherous plains, carrying little more than tools, fire, and memory. Each step away from the Sahara marked the beginning of humanity's spread across continents. In this crucible, humans forged resilience. They adapted to diverse environments: woodlands, coasts, river valleys, and each new land taught them something different. Along the Nile, they found fertile floodplains. Along the Red Sea and Arabian Peninsula, they discovered crossing points that would one day lead them out of Africa entirely. Climate collapse had sparked not just survival, but expansion. And still, the Sahara remained a cycle. For thousands of years, it would dry, then bloom, then dry again, each rhythm opening and closing doors to human movement. Archaeological layers tell the tale. Tools buried beneath dunes, traces of hearths now hundreds of miles from water, and fossils of fish where no rivers exist. Each discovery is a fragment of the Great Migration story, written in sand and stone. But even as the Sahara hardened into desert, its memory endured in rock art and fossils. Images of elephants, giraffes, and even swimmers carved into stone walls remind us that this wasteland was once alive. These carvings, left by hands thousands of years later, were echoes of ancestors who had walked a green world. The drying Sahara did not end humanity. It propelled it forward. Without the climate's push, migration may have been delayed for millennia. Instead, the desert became a doorway, forcing humans to seek out new lands and, in doing so, to begin their journey as a global species. Yet, the cycle was not finished. For as Earth's orbit tilted again, there would come a time when the Sahara returned to green, drawing people back into its heart once more. The land would not stay silent forever. Time on Earth moves in rhythms measured not in decades, but in millennia. Just as the Sahara hardened into desert, the planet's orbit began its slow turn once again. The tilt of the Earth shifted, pulling the reins northward, and after thousands of years of silence, the Sahara stirred. At first, it was subtle. A few trickles of rain, a scattering of grass, a shallow pond forming where dust had ruled. But then, in a cascade of transformation, the desert bloomed. Monsoon, rains swept across the land, filling empty basins with water. Rivers once carved into stone flowed again, and great lakes stretched across the horizon. Dust gave way to green, and the Sahara returned to life. This was the African Humid Period, the most recent rebirth of the Green Sahara, beginning nearly 12,000 years ago. Unlike earlier cycles, this one coincided with the rise of human culture, as we know it. No longer were humans just hunters and gatherers drifting through grasslands. They were becoming farmers, herders, and builders of settlements. The reborn Sahara was no longer just a corridor, it was a cradle of civilization. Archaeological discoveries tell the tale. Along the shores of ancient lakes like Lake Megachad, people built villages, raised cattle, and cultivated crops. Rock, art carved into cliffs, depicts not only wild animals, but also domesticated herds, boats, and even scenes of daily life. The Sahara had become not just green, but humanized, an environment woven into the story of culture itself. And yet, even in this abundance, the lessons of the past echoed. The Sahara's green face was fragile, tied to the same celestial rhythms that had shaped it for hundreds of thousands of years. Every river, every lake, every field of grass carried within it the shadow of impermanence. For nearly 6 millennia, the desert thrived as paradise once more. Lakes glittered like jewels across its heart. Wildlife flourished, and human societies carved out new ways of life. But in the slow turn of Earth's orbit, the pendulum was already swinging back. The question was no longer whether the Sahara would dry again, but when. And as the rains began to falter, the cycle repeated itself. Grass withered, lakes evaporated, civilizations that had grown along the water's edge were forced to scatter, and once again, the Sahara returned to sand. But unlike before, the legacy of this green world endured. The humans who left behind art, tools, and knowledge carried fragments of paradise with them. Even as the desert swallowed its rivers and plains, memory ensured it was never forgotten. And so, in this endless cycle of green and gold, the Sahara shaped not just the land, but the destiny of humankind. Still, one question lingers into the present. Could the Sahara bloom again? The Sahara today is the largest hot desert on Earth, a vast sea of dunes broken only by mountains of stone and rare oases. To the human eye, it feels eternal. Yet buried in its sands lies the memory of a greener world, a memory written in fossils, shorelines, and stone carvings. The desert has not always been what it seems. It has lived many lives. For hundreds of thousands of years, the Sahara has shifted between extremes, from golden wasteland to lush paradise, and back again. Each swing of this pendulum was driven not by chance, but by the clockwork of the planet itself, Earth's orbit, tilt, and wobble guiding the path of the monsoon. Every 20,000 years or so, the cycle would restart, and with each transformation, human history was reshaped. When the Sahara was green, it was a bridge. It carried early humans across Africa, opened pathways to the Nile, and even provided stepping stones for the first migrations out of the continent. When it was desert, it was a barrier, forcing people to adapt, innovate, or move. In its shifting moods, the Sahara was less a backdrop to human evolution than an active force guiding it. Today, scientists look back at this history not only to understand the past, but to glimpse the future. Climate models suggest that in tens of thousands of years, the Sahara may bloom again. But unlike in the past, humanity now holds the power to shape its environment. Global warming, driven not by orbital cycles, but by human hands, is altering the very systems that once dictated the Sahara's fate. What lessons does the Green Sahara offer us? It teaches that climate is never fixed. It is alive, dynamic, and capable of remaking entire worlds. It teaches that abundance and scarcity can follow one another in endless succession. And most of all, it reminds us that human survival has always been bound to the skies above and the waters that fall from them. The desert we see now is a chapter, not the whole story. Beneath its sands lie the bones of fish, the footprints of cattle, the tools of ancient humans. Beneath its silence echoes the laughter of children who once played at the edge of vast lakes, now gone. The Sahara may look eternal, but it is a world in motion, one that has been green before and will be green again. And so, the tale of the Sahara is not only about deserts and grasslands, but about humanity itself. For as the desert has changed, so too have we. The green Sahara shaped who we were and perhaps who we will be again.